Well, all right then. We will move to our staff updates. So that includes, first off, if you can still see the agenda. Is the agenda still visible, hopefully?
I lost everybody.
Oh. Linda, you'll figure it out. We can help you if you let us know. We're gonna have Rob Inerfeld from the City of Eugene Transportation Planning go first. Give us a little update, and we have time built into the agenda for community questions, points to raise, concerns, and so forth. So feel free to take us away, Rob.
That's great. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, but do you want to just bring it so we can all see each other?
Yeah.
Stop sharing your screen.
Perfect.
So I guess I'll briefly just tell you, my team does a very wide range of things in regards to transportation in Eugene. So we develop pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure projects like the East Amazon Bikeway and the bridges was just as an example of that. And the South of Willamette Street. Actually, Chris used to be on my team and his project was South of Willamette Street and redesigning that. Just as an example. So we also do what we call transportation options, which is where we encourage people to use modes of getting around other than driving alone to meet different city goals. We developed a citywide transportation plan. We also developed a Vision Zero plan, which we're now implementing, which is a goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries on our transportation system. We manage the city's relationship with Peace Health Rides bike share system. So the city's we basically made that happen. And when the Uber, which was the operator, walked away earlier this year, we had to kind of rescue it and find a new nonprofit operator. We're going to be launching a scooter share program later this year, hopefully in Eugene, because we have a traffic calming program, which might be of interest to your neighborhood because it's of interest to pretty much every neighborhood in the city. And yeah, and then we work closely with Chris's traffic operations team on responding to safety complaints or requests that we get from people in neighborhoods. And recently, for example, I got a resident sent an email expressing concerns about speeding traffic on South Willamette Street, like south of 32nd, speeding, and just like how far apart the pedestrian crossings are spaced. So those are some things we'll be looking at over the next year. I guess I would say the city of Eugene has a pretty good amount of funding compared to other cities to build pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, between our voter approved bond measure, which provides $1 million a year, charges on developers, which are called systems development charges, some funding from the state, our share of the state gas tax. And then we apply for lots of different state grants, and also we get funding through the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is called the Central Lane MPO. We get access to federal funding for that. So we do a pretty good job, but it still never feels like enough. And there's usually more need in the community than we have the ability to deliver on. And because there's a lot of great ideas out there that we hear for people. The traffic calming program, for example, is only $100,000 a year. The project we're doing traffic calming on next is Jefferson Street. And one of the reasons why we prioritize that is because it's a Vision Zero corridor. And there have been some serious injuries and at least one fatality on that street. A couple of things just to make sure you're aware of in Eugene, maintaining sidewalks is the responsibility of the property owner. Also, now we have a very small crew that goes out and inspects, and then we will repair it if the property owner wants us to, but they also have the ability, it's their prerogative if they want to hire a private contractor, but our ability to stay on top of sidewalk hazards in Eugene is extremely limited. It's also historically been the responsibility of property owners to build the sidewalks in front of their houses. That may be something we revisit someday, or we look at more of a shared model, because we haven't really been doing that in Eugene. We have in the past, we had more programs in place where we'd actually assess the property owners the cost of building the sidewalks, or they get built by developers when they build new neighborhoods, but we just haven't been building new sidewalk much in Eugene except through grants. So I guess I'll tell you about an upcoming project we have. We received a grant to do dispersed sidewalk and pedestrian crossing improvement throughout Eugene. One of the locations is Hilliard Street. So it'll be either this year or next year, we'll be constructing sidewalk on the east side of Hilliard Street, I think from around basically, you know, where it ends, if you go south from West Amazon, at a certain point, the sidewalk just ends across from Tugman Park. So from there, south to Dillard, we will be filling in the sidewalks.
Yay.
So we're really excited about that. And then another year or two after that, we're going to be repaving Hilliard Street and putting in traffic calming, potentially some raised crosswalks. And then, you know, when we built that bikeway on East Amazon, we also, at the same time, we widened the sidewalk along the west side of Hilliard Street to like a path width, but it stopped at like the north end at Tugman Park, right? And people probably wonder, well, why did they just stop it? Well, the reason is that there's wetland soils. It may not seem like there's wetlands in the park, but there are wetland soils, and the regulatory agencies basically said, you need to get wetland permits for this. And we didn't have the time. We wanted to get the project built. And so we just said, you know, this is not a critical element of the project. So we're going to put this on hold and we'll come back a few years later. So I think when we pave the street, we're going to also widen that sidewalk to path width. And so the idea was to create a shared use path experience from the Amazon path, which ends, you know, used to end at like 33rd or 34th as a, you know, as a side path. So, you know, you could go from 19th on a path all the way to 33rd or 34th. And we were like, well, if we could just get people along Hilliard to Tugman Park, then there's that other path in Tugman Park that goes all the way up the hill to Donald. So we're trying to create that like connectivity for people walking and biking where you feel really protected. Like we could have put bike lanes on Hilliard Street, but we just thought that for what our goals are around creating a really safe, you know, what we call 8 to 80 bicycling system for people 8 to 80 years old, that having a path would feel better. And so that's what we're trying to do there. And then later this year or next year, we're actually going to be building a protected bikeway on High Street. So the idea is that you could get from like South Eugene, whether it's like the top of that path at Donald, or our new bikeway we built at East Amazon that ends down by Dillard, from there all the way to like Fifth Street Market on a protected system. So we're trying to create that network of connectivity on paths and protected bikeways. And also another kind of bicycle facility we talk about are neighborhood greenways. So those are like low traffic neighborhood streets that are traffic calmed. Sometimes they even have diverters on them that keep cars from cutting through. Like Alder Street is a good example of that. I think Reed, who's on my team, and Chris were here several months ago to talk about some concerns you had specifically around like Fox Hollow, the intersections with East and West Amazon, and concerns about just how effective the stop signs are there, including the new always stop we put on East Amazon. So Chris, I don't know if you want to talk about that for a sec.
Yes, we said that we would install some video cameras to monitor the intersections. And we had heard that there was interest in doing that once school was back in session after spring break. Unfortunately, we've had a retirement, and our traffic operations engineer has left the city. So we have some staff resource issues, and we would like to do that before the end of the school year, which is just a couple weeks away. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to get the cameras up and monitor those intersections at this point. I would like to check a reminder of where the concern is, because my understanding was more concerned at West Amazon and not at East Amazon. And if it's both, it'd be helpful to know that so that we can monitor both of those.
There was a concern with the north and southbound stop at East Amazon, where there is a path crossing, bicycle crossing, Fox Hollow crossing, and 2 lanes of cars and the 2 lanes of bikes. And so there was a big concern there. And then on the West Amazon side, it was more of a concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, Linda, but the Fox Hollow crossing at West Amazon, people sort of blowing through stop signs and sort of making it unsafe for pedestrians and bicyclists, and all three. And so it was kind of both. I don't know if there was one that was more pressing than the other. I do know that, there's schools on both sides of East and West Amazon, so both are used by ones getting to school. And, judging by how the schools have gone back to, in sort of like a modified rollout, you're even with cameras posted right now, by the end of the year, you're not going to get the same look at how rush hour is going to be in the fall when schools are back. It's just not the same on East and West Amazon right now. We're not seeing the volume of traffic during rush hours. We're seeing a little bit back, but with schools not quite back in session, everybody's not out all at once. So I think you're going to get the bang for your buck in the fall with the cameras.
Okay, well, we'll focus on the fall then.
If I could speak to that too, I see issues on both because I go on West and East Amazon, pretty much West Amazon every day. And just yesterday, a truck pulling a trailer came down the hill on Fox Hollow very fast through the stop sign. It was my turn to go straight on Amazon heading south, and he cut right in front of me, made a left turn. So it's a dangerous intersection. And I see this at least once a week, that somebody's going through that stop sign, especially coming down Fox Hollow.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, I sound like a broken record, but at school let out time the fall, like just said, is going to be much more evident. But I'd like to add up the hill, Fox Hollow and 46th. To me, that's a crazy crossing for kids on foot, kids on bikes, anybody coming down Fox Hollow on a bike, trying to turn as you come out 46 to Fox Hollow and turn either left or right on Fox Hollow. Cars coming up the hill around that curve, coming down the hill at fast speeds. I just think that's a really dangerous part of that whole intersection between 46 and Amazon. And we talked the last time when the city joined us about, possibly, I don't know, putting a speed bump, a stop sign on Fox Hollow, something to really calm that traffic, because it's very dangerous. That scares me.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We've heard complaints about that before, and I feel like it kind of fell off our radar. So it's a safer to school crossing. I don't know if Sarah Mazie, who's the safer to school coordinator for 4J, has ever been here, but yeah, we'll take a look at that. Thank you.
And Reed saw it in that context as well, Rob, was going to look at it. The issues at East and West Amazon, where we already have stop control there, the compliance issue is a little concerning because people know there's a stop sign there. They're willfully disobeying the traffic control device. So we'll have to talk about what are the next steps. Enforcement is an option that's not particularly realistic because the police officers can't be everywhere at all times. So it's a little challenging to say what the next steps might be there.
Just a couple. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have a hand. And I just wanted to clarify that the East Amazon issue isn't necessarily enforcement. It's the difficulty of navigating that intersection with visibility, and the number of things going on there is very difficult. Jory, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah. So I have a few. One of you mentioned scooter. Was it Chris? Or
It was me.
yeah. Okay. Rob? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So you're gonna have some scooters to rent. So what are the where can the scooters be ridden legally? I guess I just have a question as a neighbor. Can they go on bike paths, or are they on roads?
Okay, they're allowed on bike paths. They're allowed on roads. I'm not sure they're allowed in bike lanes for sure. On streets with speed limits over 25 miles an hour, they may not be allowed in the travel lane, but if there's a bike lane, they would be allowed on that. They're not allowed on sidewalks.
Not on sidewalks. Okay.
Right. That's actually state law, is my understanding.
And will that, since this is the first time scooters will be publicly, will there be some kind of education program for those who ride scooters and those who have to deal with scooters on their ways of transport?
We did a public involvement effort to get input from the community, including from people with disabilities, about concerns about e-scooters, and so we're going to be doing like a request for proposals for companies, and we'll probably only pick one, but our priorities are safety, equity, and sustainability. Like, can the scooters be recycled? Can they be repaired so they don't just get thrown away? So we're thinking about all those different things. How making sure the scooter riders are getting some safety education like before their first ride, because a lot of the crashes happen in people's first few rides. And we're thinking about all those kinds of things. We're also going to have the ability to have a lower speed. Like I think by state law, you can operate one of those scooters at like 20 miles an hour. We might have have these set at a lower speed than that. We haven't decided that for sure.
Do they have to wear helmets?
Yes, according to state law, they do. And so also we're going to have I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're definitely going to encourage people to use helmets.
And I have a question as a person who drives my car. When you have those lights that are like Amazon corners, they're for pedestrians who are crossing the road.
Mhm.
They're bright lights. So is a driver obligated to stop? And then when that person crosses, many of us continue to drive on, even though it's still blinking yellow.
Right. Those are just to draw your attention to the fact that someone's in a crosswalk. The lights themselves are not regulatory. So so if somebody, I think Chris could correct me if I'm wrong. I think if someone decided to cross there without activating the lights, you'd still have to stop for them.
Yes.
But we put so the lights are just to help you notice that somebody is trying to cross the street. Now, we have a couple of signals in Eugene. One of them is on 30th at University. They're called pedestrian hybrid beacons. Those are red lights, but when they go to a flashing red, as long as you've come to a full stop, you're allowed to proceed as long as there's not somebody in the crosswalk.
Right. Well, a lot of these things have come up since we took our driver's test. So,
right.
We're not learning how to really drive with these new devices. Or lights,
actually, you know what? If you are interested, we have a program called Oregon Friendly Driver. I don't know if you've heard about it before, but it's basically like an education program to help people learn about all these different pedestrian and bicycle and technique devices. And we started by doing it more like with fleets, but like an organization, say like eWeb, but we could figure out a way to have your neighbor, have it be something your neighborhood could be engaged in. So I can bring that back.
That'd be good.
I'll look into that and follow up with Jess.
So I have another question. So I walk a lot in the neighborhood and on trails and on the ridgeline of Pisgah, but when I'm walking in the urban environment and there's no sidewalk, of which we've been talking about, no sidewalks, is it legal to walk on the road? And if there is a sidewalk, is it legal to walk on the road?
You want to take that one, Chris?
I don't know about the latter, but my recollection is you're supposed to walk facing traffic if you're walking on the road for safety. And it feels like a failure of our transportation system. We don't have a place for people, but we have places for cars. And of course there are people in those cars, but we can and need to do better. And some of that is funding constrained. Again, I can't answer the question, is it legal to walk in the road when there's a sidewalk? I do not know the answer to that.
Well, I guess I would, we think about liability too. And a lot of my neighbors on Mill, we walk in the street because it's easier, because the sidewalks sometimes are not available, A, or B, they have cracks and stuff in them, and it's kind of, problem to be safe on the sidewalk. So
Yes,
I would wonder how I feel about walking on the street, if it's okay.
So I see that a lot in neighborhoods where people walk on the street in groups. There's more space to be a group. The surfaces are smoother and free of trip hazards. People tend to run on softer asphalt surfaces as a preference to harder concrete surfaces. It's pretty common.
Okay, thank you.
I want to make sure we get to Linda's question. She's had her hand raised.
Well, it's actually an answer to Chris about West Amazon and Fox Hollow. And we had discussed this in our last meeting. I think it's unrealistic to think that a police officer is going to be there at the right time that somebody's going through a stop sign. So, and yes, there are stop signs and people ignore them, but that's why I had the suggestion of a blinking stop sign, which I see around town, sometimes in areas that I don't even think there's maybe a problem. but a blinking stop sign definitely gets people's attention. And with it being solar, it's not, I know there's a cost in putting the stop signs there, but there's no cost in operating them. And I think the blinking kind of gets people's attention.
So for discussion's sake, for people that already know that there's a stop sign there and they willfully ignore it, do you think that a blinking stop sign will change their willful behavior? I'm just asking.
I do. I think it will draw better attention to it, because, you know, people pay attention more when it's a blinking stop sign. But that's just my opinion. But I would at least like to see something that would help the situation.
No, thank you for the feedback.
Sure.
So just to share too, something else that we work on is we changed the speed limits on local residential streets to 20 miles an hour in the last year, and Chris's crews changed out the signs. They're also going to be looking over the next year or so at our collector streets to see if any of those should be lowered to 20 miles an hour also, which was only allowed on residential collector streets. And the legislature is hopefully going to be passing a bill soon that would enable the Oregon Department of Transportation to basically delegate speed limit setting on busier streets to cities. So we're hoping that'll happen, and maybe another year before we get the authority to do that. But we will be revisiting the speed limits on some of our busier streets and probably looking at our Vision Zero corridors first. The other thing I'll let you know is that when I talked about what my team does is we also work very closely with Lane Transit District on a range of different things, including our Moving Ahead program, which is looking at potential future MX, or what we call enhanced corridors, which would be frequent bus corridors. And I understand like some of the frustrations you had around the Transit Tomorrow process, and we'd be happy to be involved in future conversations about transit service in your neighborhood between, in addition to LTD, of course, because it's ultimately their decision, but there may be a way that we could help with that conversation, and also look at how do people get to the bus stops? Are there safe pedestrian crossings? Are there sidewalks? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
One other upcoming project that it's not in your neighborhood, but you might be interested to know, is we're going to be converting Willamette Street to two-way from 18th to 20th. In fact, I think we may have just started construction like today or something like that on that. So, and we'll be adding bike lanes too, so that, and making some other changes to Oak and 20th. So that's on its way. So there'll be a lot of construction activity in the Willamette corridor this summer, but it's something to look forward to after that.
What would be the best way to, as you said, to have conversations about the, connecting to bus stops and helping us with our Transit Tomorrow, et cetera, concerns with LTD?
I mean, one option would be that you create like a smaller committee where we just have some conversations about process. Some neighborhoods have done like safe streets audits where they've provided recommendations about things like that. Yeah, I don't know what the best approach should be. I think that would be like a smaller conversation to have.
Sounds good. We'll follow up on that. It's a great offer. We appreciate it.
It is really interesting just hearing the folks introduce yourselves and talk about like where you live. I mean, Southeast is a huge neighborhood. It's probably I imagine one of the bigger neighborhood association areas in Eugene. And, there's just probably different transportation issues in different parts of the neighborhood. We also, like, the city of Eugene has a concept that we haven't really been doing much with lately, although I think there's a Washington Post article about it today called 20-minute neighborhoods. That's specifically about what we're doing in Eugene. But the idea of looking at, like, say, like the Safeway on 40th, and like, how easy is it for people to walk there, working out block by block? Are there barriers to people being able to walk to their neighborhood grocery store and, without the other businesses that are located there, and or even whether it's Woodfield Station, because that's pretty close to your neighborhood too, or some of the cafes you have. So, just like looking at how, or the Albertsons, actually, you have multiple supermarkets owned by the same company. So, like, how do we help people with those access issues and being able to cross the street, being able to bike, things like that. So we're definitely interested in those kinds of conversations. And I guess the last thing I'd say is, if we build anything like the bikeway on East Amazon, we're open to hearing feedback about it. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go tear it out, but it does help us learn how we did. Is there something that could affect other projects that we do, or are there tweaks we can make to it? We had intended to add a 4th pedestrian bridge near the north end around like 37th. We have some engineering challenges there with the creek and the culvert at Hilliard, and we don't know and just like when you build bridges like that, you have to land them at the street and meet the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so there's, sometimes you have to kind of ramp around. So there's just a bunch of issues there. So we don't know if we're going to be able to build that project or not, but it's still something we're thinking about. We might also build some parking bays on East Amazon where we took off some of the parking to facilitate where there's some challenges. So if folks know of, I think there's a couple of daycares, for example, in East Amazon where it might help if people were able to park on the street there. So we're going to take another look at that too. But, I should probably, I don't know, I could put my email address in the chat if people want to follow up with me. The other thing we have is we have an e-newsletter called In Motion. Does anybody get In Motion? If you do, raise your hand. It's all about walking and biking and transit and active transportation in Eugene, Springfield. And so we definitely encourage people to sign up for it. If you just go to just Google like City of Eugene Transportation and just look up, you should be able to find it, but you can also email me, just give me your email. And we have an online sign up, or you could just email me your email address. So like I said, I'll pop my email in the chat. Oh, and somebody already put up the Washington Post article. Your media expert.
John, you can't beat John Q to anything.
Yeah.
So don't try. We can take one more question, Linda, and then we'll move on.
I'll make it quick. Rob, we had talked about the East Amazon improvements for bikes and walking, all that, and that there are some issues around it. And one thing that we brought up, I think at the last meeting, but at least at our meetings, is when bikes are coming or runners, because that seems to be a lot. I understand that the state law is that bikes do not have to stop at that 4-way stop sign, that they don't have to stop, but I believe the law says they have to yield. And so I had a group of like 6 bikers. I was gonna turn left from Fox Hollow onto East Amazon heading north, and they just like rode right in front of me. They didn't stop, a whole group of them. And of course I stopped, obviously, but I understand they don't have to stop, but I'm thinking if there could be some little sign about bikes have to yield or something to remind them that the law is, yes, you can go through stop signs, but the law is that you have to yield. So they can't just
right. You're right, and they should. If you were there first, they should have stopped, because that would be.
I was in the act of actually turning.
I don't know that we're going to add anything to signs necessarily. I mean, I can talk with Chris about that if there's a few. There's so many stop signs in Eugene. I understand this is a bikeway. Maybe it's a special case. Certainly, we could do more to educate people about the law, make sure they understand that you treat stop signs as a yield. It doesn't mean you get to just go through. Of course, if there's no one around, you can just go through it, because that would be treated like a yield. So yeah, thank you. That's a really good point.
We added stop legends to the pavement there already.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't notice that, but I will look. Yeah, thanks.
For the bikeway, Chris, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you.
Interesting.
So one last wrap up, just as a committee, we've heard, different things about where to go. Most common complaint that we get are speed complaints, just people disregarding the 20-mile-an-hour limit and going very quickly through our neighborhoods. We get those all the time. We've heard go to our contact at the police. We've heard go to you guys. What is the most efficient system that we can use to help alert you to speeding issues that are repetitive?
That's a really good question. I think it was Linda who pointed out, having a police officer come out, that's a very limited time thing. It's still, we have motorcycle officers in Eugene whose job is to do traffic enforcement, including speed enforcement. So I think it's a good idea to call the police non-emergency line and bring it to their attention. They used to have go ahead, Chris.
They do have a direct number for the traffic safety unit.
I feel like I tried calling that recently and it didn't work.
Well, I called it and left a message. Anyway, it's
okay.
541-6 682-5157. I'll type that in the chat.
Okay.
And then, you can email, I can get you a contact on my team. Well, actually, our person who does the intake on our team for speeding complaints is Lee Shoemaker. So that would be lshoemaker@eugene-or.gov. You can also just call Public Works Maintenance. And I think that, this is if it's like a traffic calming request. So it wouldn't be per se just complaining about speeding, but it's if someone wants traffic coming on the street, which, we're usually several years out in that, even if a street even qualifies, it's never a sure thing, but still it's a valid thing that we do. And so you can call 682-4800, which is Public Works Maintenance, and then they will log it into the system, and we'll get an email from that. That's just one thing to know about that phone number is it's only during business hours and you can't leave a voicemail. But you can email Lee Shoemaker also with concerns. We also, you could also ask Lee. We have the ability, or Chris's team would be taking the lead on it, but we can help with the intake. It's just there's those speed feedback signs that we have access to, both through our own crews and through a trailer, I think through the police, that they can access that can be put on neighborhood streets and give people feedback about how fast they're going.
So that's why it's important to call the police, because they have their system. The other system Rob mentioned is they're not trailers. They're mounted on existing signs or posts, and we have yet to figure out how to manage that system. It's pretty new.
The deer crossing, can we ask, who do we contact to get a deer crossing sign?
Somebody that knows how to speak deer.
Well, we have a lot of them crossing on Fox Hollow particularly. And
You
getting
can-
hurt.
You can call that 541-682-4800 and make a sign request, and
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. This was really helpful. Thanks for being here and offering to come. We didn't have to beg. Their expertise was offered today, and we really appreciate you staying in touch and following up with Southeast neighbors on all these issues. And we hope to keep in touch on these things. Neighbors, if you do have continued questions for our city staff, you're welcome to either send them to us or send them to them directly, and we'll make sure that they get through. And